Go ahead.
All right. I'd like to go ahead and call to order the January 12th, 2021 regularly scheduled meeting of the Johnson City Regional Planning Commission. We are meeting virtually due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the governor's orders permitting us to do so. I'd like to welcome everybody back this year and also welcome Jenny, who is going to be joining us as the City Commissioner representative. So glad to have you on board, Jenny. Looking forward to your participation. Let's go ahead and begin the meeting with the invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm going to ask if Vice Chair Cooper would lead us in those two, please.
Please join me in prayer. Dear Lord, especially during these very trying times, bring to this group and especially this meeting tonight, the wisdom and goodwill as we consider the needs of our community and make decisions in everyone's best interest. Bless us all, keep us safe, and give us wisdom to continue to do the good work for this community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We're going to begin with the approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any additions or corrections that need to be made? If not, then I'm looking for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve them.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is going to be the approval of the minutes from the December 8th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. The minutes have been distributed. Were there any corrections? Nicole, I had just one correction. It was under new items or new business, and it was item C. I believe in the first or second paragraph, the word sell, S-E-L-L, should be changed to sale, S-A-L-E.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Were there any other corrections? If not, then I am looking for a motion to approve those minutes.
I move the minutes be approved as submitted.
Second.
All right.
We need to make a note of.
With the correction, yes.
With the correction, yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right.
Chairman Wild, note for the minutes that I abstained from voting since I was not present at the last meeting.
Thank you. Okay. All right. We do not have any old business on the agenda, so we're going to move right into the first item of new business, item 6.1, and that is a right-of-way abandonment. It is to consider the request to abandon the public right-of-way on Burbank Drive. And give it to Will to do the presentation, please.
Good evening, Chairman Wild, Vice Chairman Cooper, Commissioners, Mr. Mitchell. Good to be back. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The City of Johnson City has received a request from Harry Stollard, owner of Transportation Systems Incorporated, to abandon the right-of-way known as Burbank Drive. Burbank Drive, you can see here, is East Fairview Avenue. Burbank Drive is depicted in red. Transportation Systems, Mr. Stollard, they own all 3 properties that adjoin the Burbank Drive. The purpose of the abandonment is to add additional land to the property. There is no proposed development at this time. Over here to the left of the screen, you can see the various city departments and agencies that were reached out to for comment. There is an existing sewer line I should also mention too at this point that the owner intends to consolidate all 3 of these properties into one lot upon abandonment of the right of way. There'll be several easements that will be required. There's a sewer line that's in Burbank Drive, which we'll need to reserve an easement for. There are also 2 existing water meters here in yellow, if you can make those out, that will need to be relocated to the public right of way of East Fairview Avenue by the Water and Sewer Services Department. And there are overhead power lines, which they'll require an easement for Bright Ridge to maintain those lines. There is one correction to the staff report that I sent out earlier and to the comments over here from Atmos Energy. When I first received their feedback, they indicated that there was a gas main under Burbank Drive. That is not the case. There is a line in the right of way of East Fairview Avenue, and there is a service line. I spoke with Atmos myself today. There is a service line that services the property to the left of Burbank Drive, which they said as long as the property's consolidated, they would not be requiring an easement. So that will be a change to the recommendation that you saw in your staff report. Staff recommendation is to abandon the right of way and require the following easements upon final plat submittal: 20-foot wide easement for Bright Ridge to maintain overhead power lines, and a 15-foot wide utility easement to maintain an existing sewer line. Water and Sewer Service Department will relocate 2 existing water meters along Burbank Drive to the right of way along East Fairview Avenue upon abandonment of the right of way.
Will, has the water department agreed to relocate those at no cost to the owner?
Yes, that was in Travis Ollinger's comments that the Water and Sewer Department would relocate those.
Okay.
Okay, are there any questions of staff at this time?
I have a question. So I understand there's no current development in process and he's going to consolidate these lots. I'm just curious on the timing of why doing this now.
Well, I mean, and maybe Mr. Mize, John Mize, the surveyor is here and he can certainly speak, but I'll just reiterate that the Burbank Drive services no other properties other than those 3. There is no proposed development. It would, by making the property larger, if they did want to expand in the future, it would ease the any sort of redevelopment that might occur. I don't have an answer as to the timing as to why now.
Okay.
Perhaps the surveyor could elaborate.
Mr. Otter, if with the easements that have to occur on this property, is he absolutely aware of what he can and can't do with the property in the future?
Yes.
For example, not being able to build a building on top of it.
That's
I
correct.
think. Okay. And I was curious at Mr. Cooper's question about the water mains, moving those. I'm just a little curious why the city's going to do that at no cost to him, because we're giving him property.
That would be a question I would need to ask the Water and Sewer Department as far as why they agreed to that. And I don't believe they're on the call here.
Okay.
There's Public Works.
Is that something someone from Public Works could answer for us?
That's something we wouldn't answer for water and sewer.
Okay.
If Travis is available, he can maybe answer that, but we can get back to you once we get input from him
Can someone try to give Travis a call?
on the just the water meters, right?
The water
Yes,
lines.
Well, the question concerns
Sorry, water meters.
why the water department has agreed to relocate those meters at no cost to the applicant and have the city incur the cost rather than the applicant.
I'll call him.
Thank you. All right, are there other questions of staff at this time? If not, I'd like to go ahead and open the public meeting. I do believe we have either the applicant or his representative available to speak. And so maybe we can be enlightened on some of this and if anybody else wants to speak. So Wendy, can you show the public hearing call-in information, please? Okay, and Mr. Mize, did you want to speak on this item?
Need to be reminded to unmute himself.
You need to unmute yourself if you're trying to speak with us. I don't see him anymore. Have I lost?
Yeah, he's there.
Now,
Okay.
I believe I've got it unmuted now.
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay.
Whatever you may have said, if you wouldn't mind repeating, please.
Well, I was mumbling to myself because I couldn't find the unmute button. But yeah. But the reason, as Will told you, Mr. Stallard is trying to just increase his property area. He's and then also with taking this right of way out, we decrease all the setback lines that go off of a right of way. So he would gain substantial property. And yes, he knows that you can't develop across these easements, without, going through the proper procedure to change the easement location or do things of that nature. Now, as for the timing, I'm not sure on that, what was generating the timing. It's just they're just doing a lot of cleanup out there and getting their physical property in better shape and better order. And you just think that may just be the reason that, well, let's try to do this.
Okay.
Travis is logging on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on, I believe.
All right, Travis, we had a question during the presentation. Will signified that the water department had agreed to relocate the 2 water mains or meters at no cost to the applicant. And question was, why is the city incurring that cost rather than the applicant?
Okay. Yeah, our department sees this as a positive opportunity for us to eliminate an asset. We currently have a line that it's, as I understand it, we have small service lines that extend within this public right of way. And currently we have to maintain those, and at some point they would have to be replaced. However, if they're wanting to take ownership of this right of way and it be abandoned, that would allow us to move the meters back to Fairview and thus eliminate that asset. So it's really a positive for us, and we would be willing to move the meters to the public right of way of Fairview at no cost.
So there'd be 1 meter, Travis, instead of multiple meters.
Well, I think I want to say there's 2 over there, And we would move those both. They're small. If I'm not mistaken, they're either 3/4 or 1-inch meters. So it's really a win-win for us. It's one less pop we have to take care of, or I guess I should say a lot less pop that we have to take care of. That would be one less asset that we would have to maintain over time.
Okay,
Thank you, Travis. That makes sense. Appreciate it.
thanks.
No problem.
Okay.
Guys, I believe I saw that this property was for sale. Does anyone else know that?
I'll answer that question. It's not currently on the market. Mr. Stallard has owned the property for 30 years. He'd be with us this evening, but he's in Memphis having heart valve surgery. And he's wanted to do this for a long, long time, and to make the property more functional for his own use and future expansion. And until the fact is that this in fact can be done, there hasn't been any planning to do that.
Thank you.
Jerry, if I could, my mistake, and I need to do the same with John Mize. Could I have you both please state your name and address for the record? I failed to ask you to state those before you spoke.
Sure. My name is Jerry Petzel. My business address is 221 Cumberland Street, Kingsport, Tennessee.
Thank you. And Mr. Mize?
I'm John Mize, land surveyor. My address is 690 Cross Community Road in Blunttville, Tennessee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Wendy, is there anybody else that has called in and is asked to speak about this?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And Jerry or John, did either of you have anything else that you all wanted to add regarding this matter?
On behalf of Mr. Stallard, he's asking you all to approve his request.
And I have no further comments, just I can stay and answer any questions that might come up, but I appreciate y'all taking this up for us.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your being here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, but again, we'll keep John and Jerry both on the line if any questions come up that they may be able to answer during our discussion. So I'm going to open the floor for discussion amongst commissioners and or a motion.
I move that we,
Oh, before you move, I'm sorry, Bob, I had one quick question. Is
Sure.
there any precedence for anything like this in the past?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we often address this and change the right of way when it's of no use to the city particularly.
I've seen us have some other cases where we've abandoned right of ways. I didn't know if they were usually for a single property owner. I didn't know if there was precedence where we were going to take 3 lots and turn them into a single lot or anything like this.
well, no, we're not doing that tonight.
No, tonight we're just doing the right of way abandonment. Okay. All right. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
All right. I move that we approve this right-of-way request and that our approval includes maintaining a 20-foot wide easement for Bright Ridge for their power lines and a 15-foot wide utility easement for sanitary sewer.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Cooper and a second by Commissioner Whitfield. Is there any other discussion? All right, Nicole, would you please call the roll for a vote, please?
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mays,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Brock,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Wild.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay. Motion has approved, and we thank you again very much, John and Jerry, for being with us to answer our questions and You're welcome to hang out if you want to listen to the rest of the meeting. We just ask that you mute yourself probably.
I think it's supper time now. Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to the second item of new business then. This is item 6.2. It is a rezoning to consider the rezoning of 640 and 700 East Maple Street from R5 to MX1 district and 701 East Maple Street from B3 to MX1 district.
Thank you, Dr. Wild. I will share my screen here. Can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. As you noted, this is a request to rezone 3 pieces of property, 2 of which have the same zoning classification, and the third, something different. 640 and 700 East Maple from R5 to MX1, and then 701 East Maple from B3 to MX1. So we'll dive right into this. Looking here at a bird's eye view, you'll see Legion Street, which runs north-south, and if you were headed towards the bottom part of the screen, you'd be headed towards City Hall, past Cardinal Park, that area. Alabama Street, short little local street that connects Legion Street with East Maple. You'll note here the Tweetsie Trail trailhead, the parking lot. And then right here at the other side of, or the other end of Alabama Street are the 3 properties that are in question tonight. So you'll see that they are grouped right here at this intersection of East Maple and Alabama. 701 is currently the Local Motion Cyclery. That's the one that is currently zone B3. And then 640 and 700. 640 is a dilapidated structure that the property owner intends to demo and then rebuild. And then 700 is currently a vacant lot. So let's take a look from plan view. As noted, this is a request to rezone all 3 of these to the mixed-use neighborhood district. You'll see here 701 currently zoned B3, and then the other 2, 640 and 700, are zoned R5, along with the rest of this little neighborhood here along the south and west side of East Maple Street. I don't have the contours turned on right here, but 640 and 700 reach uphill. There's about a 150-foot elevation change from East Maple up here to the top of the hill, up here to Taylor Ridge. The intent behind the mixed-use district, specifically the mixed-use neighborhood district, is that of small scale. It is to allow for a mixing of uses. There's less reliance on separation of uses like you have in a traditional zoning code, and more reliance, more importance on design, especially when you're bringing uses together. The intent with the MX district is also one of pedestrian and bike orientation. So sharing those spaces with pedestrians and cyclists, and it not being just automobile oriented or focused on the vehicle like you might find with more traditional commercial zones along the state of Franklin. Staff worked with the property owner with this request, trying to find the right zoning district for what he was trying to accomplish. We believe that the MX1 is compatible with the area, compatible with neighborhood edges, compatible with these little nodes that we find around town, allowing for small scale, neighborhood scale goods and services to be able to pop up as infill development in these urbanized areas. You may recall that we had a very, very similar conversation with the MX1 over in the Mountain Home area, where Watauga Road reaches up from state of Franklin in the Highlands area. I'm sorry, Highland Road area, Founders Park. Very similar conversation about small scale, neighborhood scale mixing of uses where design is more important, and as well as pedestrian and bicycle amenities. So let's jump down to the ground here. This is a ground shot. You'll see local motion on the left here. This is 701. Again, the request is just to convert from B3 to MX1. That's really just for continuity purposes with the entire development, looking at it from a comprehensive view. And then 640 and 700. The property owner, Mr. Winston, who we expect to call in and be a part of the conversation, recently purchased 640 last fall, I believe. And knowing that it was a dilapidated property, in fact, right after his purchase, he was sent to the BDSR, to the Board of Dwelling Standards and Review. And so he was prepared for that, shared with them that he has plans for this property, and they deferred his item until January so that he can get this process started. He was also considering purchasing the vacant lot next door, 700, because this would be part of his concept plan, and I'm about to show you that here in a minute. So let's take a look at the concept plan that was provided. You'll see Alabama Street right here that reaches over towards the Tweetsie. Here is the local motion cyclery. And then across, he shows the proposed rebuild of the building at 640, where he's looking to do a 2-story structure with a covered patio, 2 parking spaces right up the hill, and then he is also looking to do a child's or a small scale pump track, very similar to what you would find up on top of Tannery Knobs, but a much smaller version. Have a sitting area and really just entertainment and opportunities for folks who may have ridden on the Tweetsie Trail to come off and grab a cup of coffee, grab a beer, maybe watch their kids ride the pump track, and enjoy the afternoon before heading home. Over here on the right-hand side of the screen, he's done just a quick sketch of what he's proposing to do as part of the rebuild. He's looking at doing some storage, retail, maybe even a Italian ice or something like that, kind of a walk-up opportunity for folks at the ground level. And then on this middle level is where he's looking to expand retail, showroom for bikes and things like that, as well as have a small tap room. And then, of course, the covered patio that would overlook the pump track. One of the things that I want to point out that we discussed at a staff level, and we also discussed with the applicant in trying to decide upon the most appropriate zoning district for what he's looking to do is and especially trying to grow this little neighborhood node. How can you justify growing a little neighborhood node in an area that is already predominantly residential? Well, everything changed in this area when the Tweetsie Trail was developed. When you look at the comp plan, and especially at the future land use map, very similar to the situation that happened with Mountain Home, it recommends that this entire area remain residential. However, that predated many of the decisions that were made by city leaders to put the Tweetsie Trail in. I believe may have also predated Cardinal Park, as well as the linear paths that connect Tweetsie Trail to Cardinal Park. So with Cardinal Park going in, MPCC being remodeled, redeveloped, and then Tweetsie Trail, you have a whole new emphasis on recreation in this area. Outdoor recreation, biking, walking, connectivity. And so you'll note that Mr. Winston took advantage of this by opening local motion a couple of years ago, and really just wants to grow on that idea. What I've shown here on the screen is just gives you an idea of some of the area recreational assets. As I pointed out, the Tweetsie Trail, the linear paths reaching up towards town. You'll see Cardinal Park just up here at the top of the screen, Memorial Park. So you've got both linear and destination recreational opportunities here. 7 to 10 minute walk is really everything within this screen. 6 to 7 minute bike ride to downtown. Just so happens that this area falls along a transit line, the blue line. So we really feel that there's an opportunity here, not only for some infill and some small scale growth, but a new opportunity for Mr. Winston to be able to repair or redevelop a dilapidated structure and really turn this little node into something special. So the staff recommendation is to approve his rezoning for the 3 lots, as well as approve his concept plan. I'll turn it back over to you.
Princeton, I'm sorry, one quick question, Preston. You said NPCC. What's NPCC?
Memorial Park, it's up here on the top right-hand side of the screen. Memorial
Okay.
Park Community Center.
Oh, MPCC. Okay, I thought you said, all right, thank you.
Hey, Preston, I have a question. Did you say that he currently owns lot 700 or he does not own it?
He owns all 3 now.
He does. Okay, thank you.
Preston, wasn't there a neighborhood meeting last night for this item?
There was a neighborhood meeting. Myself and Whitney Hodges, who's also on the call, we were there with Mr. Winston, presented his item, and we did not have any other individuals log on to the meeting. We did have one caller, Mr. Pavlich, called in. He had watched the neighborhood meeting, had a question. And during the neighborhood meeting, just so we could make sure that we wanted to keep it going, we didn't want to cut it short on anybody. We asked Ms. Graham how many viewers we had. Did have a fairly low turnout. We mailed roughly 200 letters for this particular meeting, but understand that we had about 5 viewers on YouTube.
Has there been any feedback received from the adjacent landowners, particularly at 702, 636, or 703?
I have not received any feedback. I've not received phone calls or email regarding this item that I'm aware of. I've been out of the office and I've been trying to catch up on everything. But I have not personally received anything. Mr. Ryder, I believe, indicated that he had fielded 2 phone calls. I believe one, he had a conversation with the individual, and then the other, he simply returned and left a message.
Okay. Will, are
Could
you
you-
on the call?
Yeah, could you share? I'm sorry.
I was going to say, Will, could you expand on those 2 calls if you have a recollection of them?
One of them was from Richard McLean of the Housing Authority. He received notification. There was a Keystone property apparently that went out in the mailing list. He called, asked questions about it. He was really excited about the proposal, thinks that it'd be a very good, that it falls in line with, with the bike shop, the Tweetsy Trail, adds some new life into the neighborhood, takes care of a dilapidated structure that's at the BDSR. So he was happy about it. The other one, I received a voice, or I received voice message. They said they wanted information about the property or about the rezoning. I called, did not get a hold of them, but I left a voice message and explained the scope of the rezoning, and they did not call back. Those were the 2 calls I received.
All right, thank you.
Do we have any feedback from the neighbors who may be opposing this, or are you saying there was none?
Based on the fact that I have not received any emails or phone calls, and Mr. Ryder has indicated those that he fielded. You always want to be careful with making assumptions, but we mailed letters identifying the neighborhood meeting as well as tonight's meeting and the opportunity to speak. And sometimes when folks are either in favor or somewhat neutral to an item, we may not hear from them.
Okay.
I do believe that Mr. Winston has had several conversations with folks in the area. For example, I know that he had conversations with the gentleman or the folks that own 636. That was one of the properties that you specifically asked about, Dr. Wild. So his conversations with 636 may have addressed any concerns they had, but I would need to rely on Mr. Winston when he calls in to see exactly who he has spoken with.
Hey, Bron's on the phone and I don't think you can hear him.
Well, let's go ahead and, if y'all don't mind, let's open up the public hearing officially. And that way we can see if there is any feedback from the applicant or from any of the neighbors who might want to speak in support or opposition to this. And then we can continue our discussion afterwards.
So what I'll do is I will stop sharing my screen so that, hang on one second here.
Wendy already overrode you.
Wendy's got you.
Good.
Chairwoman Wild, I did have one question before we open public comment.
Certainly.
And it may inform some of the public comments if they're there. Preston, do you mind to review permitted uses in MX1 and also any particular restrictions on those uses, given that it is a mixed use designation that is going to be close to residential designations within the city? Could you do that for us just very quickly?
Sure, I'll be happy to. So if you recall, as part of the Mountain Home, wait a minute, am I unmuted? Yes. As part of the Mountain Home rezoning and MX1 text amendment, Mr. Manley, prior to his departure, he presented on the text amendment and what we were proposing for changes. The permitted uses would be, from a residential perspective, would be 2-family and multifamily, which is consistent with any other mixed use zone. Family care homes, or I'm sorry, I should say family child care homes, group child care homes, that too would be typical of a residential or a mixed use district. Nursing homes, and then you get into the non-residential. The non-residential uses vary from professional offices to general and specialty retail, to government offices, to a bakery, a bed and breakfast, a bank, small scale laundromat, pharmacy, restaurant, and then accessory structures. So it is the traditional type of neighborhood edge or small node uses that are the goods and services folks can easily walk to. If folks on a Saturday morning want to walk over and grab something from, grab a breakfast and a cup of coffee, and then afterwards on their way home, pick up medication at the pharmacy and they're dry cleaning, they could do all that in the mixed use district. One thing to note with the non-residential is that they are limited to 2,000 square feet of floor area. Now that excludes any patios or decks, but they are limited to 2,000 square feet. So that's a small square footage. So you're automatically, with that kind of limitation on square footage, going to knock out the larger, more corporate or national uses that are desiring to be located along State of Franklin or in the mall or things like that, because they've got minimum square footages that they have to meet. These types of zones, you're really going to find mom and pop businesses, small scale neighborhood services, just like Local Motion. Just so happens that building, because we measured it, is about 1,800 square feet. So it meets the intent of a mixed use district.
Thank you, sir.
Preston, as I understand it, thinking back to our previous discussions about just the general concept of nodes, just without any other issues or any other concerns or needs identified, this particular location could very well be considered a node from a future planning standpoint.
Absolutely, for a variety of reasons. Let's remove the recreational assets. I mean, I think those are fairly easy to talk about. Let's just remove the recreational assets and look at some of the infrastructure on the ground. East Maple Street, even though it looks and feels like a local road, is actually a collector. So East Maple Street is intended or designed to be a little bit higher volume, and intended to collect vehicles. That's why we use that term. Alabama, the short little Alabama is a local road. And then you've got Legion Street, which is an arterial. Legion's same designation as State of Franklin through downtown. And so where you often have arterials and collectors coming together, you can easily find these nodes. Another is when you have transit. You may recall, some of you who were on the Planning Commission at the time, conversation that staff had with you about the rezoning out on Watauga Road, out at MacArthur, out past the Pepsi plant. In that particular area where the Dollar General went in, is an opportunity for a small little neighborhood node for that neighborhood, because you've got an arterial road adjoining either a local or a collector, and you've got transit service out there. So you have a number of different urban services being provided that coalesce into one particular area. So you take those items and then you reintroduce the recreational opportunities or assets that I've already mentioned. And we would argue that, yes, from a planning perspective, this is right for something like this. We would love in the future to engage in conversation with the industrial use to see whether or not there are opportunities for redevelopment of the end of that property. So opportunities abound for this particular area, and it really is in large part to the city making the investment that they did with the trail.
Thanks.
So just a question and a comment as well. And Winston, you're on the call, is that correct?
I don't think
Yes,
they can
I'm
hear me.
here.
Oh, there he is.
Okay.
I'm here.
All right. Good to hear you, Winston. You know, I am all over an asset like this, talking about the pump track and everything. I think you've got some really very creative ideas for that corner, and I agree with everything that's been said so far. Preston, you spent a long time talking about the compatibility with the other recreational assets and pointing them out on the map, and that is absolutely true. However, the Tweetsie Trailhead, Cardinal Park, MPCC, all of those other assets don't have residential on either side of them. So the question is a pump track and a recreational asset compatible with an R4 neighborhood to be wedged in between two property owners, because it will create an absolute difference in their life. That would include the properties, I think, in the back that are on Pine Street there. So that's just what I'm kind of trying to deal with in my head. Is that a place where you would want to put, it's going to be I promise you, it will be very active there. You've got 2 parking spots. It will be more than that. You know, so where will people be parking? I guess on Maple Street there, in front of the residential areas, which I think most of the homes up Maple Street back toward Rome Street, they have street parking. So that would be another little concern that I have. That I'm not saying they can't be overcome, but I just want to make sure in my mind there is an answer to the compatibility of what the concept is. And so I would really be interested in knowing more about what the neighbors feel about this project.
If I can interrupt for just a minute, Mr. Winston, can you turn down the volume on your computer there? So just for the phone, please.
Oh, well, it's completely down. I don't know if it's the echo on my phone, so I apologize. I can mute my phone.
Thank you.
Why don't, is Mr. Winston the only one that's called in right now, Wendy?
Yes.
Why don't we go ahead and let him speak, and perhaps he can address some of Jenny's concerns, because I share those as well. I particularly share the concern about parking and compatibility with the adjacent homeowners, and that's why I asked about those specific properties. So if you would, Mr. Winston, go ahead and give us your name and address for the record, and then we'd love to hear your feedback about some of the concerns that have been expressed or any other information you could provide for us.
Sure. Brian Winston. My address is 1711 Knob Creek Road, Johnson City, Tennessee. Thank you guys for allowing me to speak here. Commissioner Brock, you've been you're a great push for me even doing the local motion. You were all about that at that time. So I do understand the concerns of parking. We have committed, parking spaces based on square footage. What I'll also be doing is implementing bike racks. We do believe the majority of, we're not going to be a drive-to destination. We think a lot of the majority of our customers are going to be coming off of the Tweetsie Trail, whether that be running or walking or riding a bicycle. There's an abundance of parking in the general area. I've got local motion there, limited number of parking spaces, but I still do have that. And then there's a proximity of parking, and Preston would probably have to go into a little bit more detail in regards to, proximity of additional parking spaces. Yes, we're not going to be open, right now we're a 9 to 6 business at Local Motion. And I don't foresee this operating and throughout, all hours of the evening, or we're just going to be limited into what we're doing. Whether, some of the things that we've got in play, we've got landscaping, trees, shrubbery, privacy fence, a certain height of fencing, and we just don't want to be a noise issue. And so, that has crossed my mind several times too. But at the same time, I think our community is growing in the, I'm a cyclist, been doing it for a long time. And with Tannery Knobs and Wing Deer Park and Tweetsie Trail and Buffalo Mountain Park, hopefully going forward, I think there's a huge growth opportunity, and it's a business opportunity as well. So I understand the neighborhood concepts and the concerns with that, and the parking aspect. Again, Preston can highlight that. I hope that helps. Sorry.
No, we do. We appreciate that. And please stay on the line in case we have additional questions for you.
Okay, I'll mute it. Thank you.
I've got a question, Chairman Wiles. Mr. Winston, would you help us by characterizing any discussions you have had with local neighbors?
Sure. We've been there. We've been operating now for just 2.5 years. Gotten to know a lot of the neighbors up and down Maple Street, or whether they be coming by and just stopping in the shop. Those who I've talked to, discussed with, my plans as I purchased the home, and then I eventually purchased the lot. Everyone seems to be excited. First and foremost, that site, when you come up to the stop sign on Alabama Street to take a left or right on Alabama, the structure itself is not the most appealing. I think they're really excited about that. And it gives the opportunity to have something more there closer to them. It's just another business, and maybe bring some assets to them, and hopefully get some additional revitalization to that area. I was about to say downtown area, but to that area. So for the most part, I personally haven't had any negative comments given to me one-on-one. There was one lady that stopped in. She does not live on Maple. I was told by my employees, I think she stopped in Saturday and wanted them to discuss with them what it was. And her concern was, if we're selling beer, maybe a mom will drive her kid home after she's had a beer. But that's the only negative thing that I've heard to this date. But everything's been positive for what we've done already, and for the detail that I've given to those who have inquired about it.
Thank you.
Have you had a chance to speak with the neighbors on the immediate either side of the property?
Yes, actually, the 634 property where the house is, I bought the vacant lot from them. And the other one is a rental. So the one to the left of 700, I have not spoken to anyone at that property. So besides the one I bought the property from, that's the only one I've had any communication with.
Okay.
So how long has the sign up for rezoning been on the property? How long has that been open?
Nicole, when did the signs get placed? I'm getting some feedback.
I took pictures when I placed the signs. So they were placed on December the 31st, in the morning.
Okay, thank you.
So that
And
hasn't even been 2 weeks yet, correct?
When you say that's a collector street, how wide is that street?
We can measure it. If you'll give us just a minute, we can measure it. But it is actually the placement of the signs, the time frame for the placement of the signs is typical for any other rezoning. And we also placed 3 signs. We didn't just place one. There's one at Local Motion and then 2 in front of the other properties.
So Preston, a quick question. I noticed because I was by there yesterday, I think. We don't put what it's being requested to be zoned to on the signs anymore. Why is that? So the only thing the neighborhood sees is we're going to rezone this property.
Well, I can't speak to why because ever since I've been here, it's the same sign for the last 2 years. Or at least since November of 2018, we've been using that particular sign. It is typical to, and I say that just because the last 3 cities I worked in 3 different states, it is typical for the rezoning sign to indicate a rezoning and then indicate a phone number. That's really the most important thing, is that you always give a phone number so that someone can call and ask questions. We actually received more phone calls on the Mountain Home rezoning because of the signage than we did from the letters that were mailed. So the signs are actually they actually work quite well. It is, I can't speak to why we as a city have not been putting the from and to district on there. A lot of times, and I just will offer this argument from my previous location, folks generally just don't know what all of our acronyms are. You know, we live in a world of acronym soup. And so the best thing to do is for folks to call in. And that's why we have the phone number on there, big and bold. And we received a tremendous number of phone calls on Mountain Home. So we know that the signs are effective.
Preston, you might be able to just sum up this without having to measure. A collector street has enough parking on both sides of the street and still maintain the operation of the road. Is that correct?
It's about 40 feet. East Maple, I just measured it. Looks like it's a 40-foot right of way.
So you have on-street parking on both sides. Is that correct?
No,
I don't believe
it's
you have
only
it
on
on
one
both
side.
sides. Right. You've got it on one side. Now, the important thing to note is that the designated parking spaces on East Maple Street cannot be used by Mr. Winston to count towards his parking. Now, that's not to say that the general public can't use them. Anybody from the general public can use them if there's one that's open. He just simply can't use that in determining his compliance with the code. But because the square footage of his building is so small, he actually is not triggering very many spaces. So what he's triggering is 4 spaces. And so he actually then can reduce that by 1 because he's going to do the bike rack. He could actually even, no, I don't believe he could reduce it again, but he can reduce it using the bike rack down to 3. And he's got 2 on site, and then the MX1 allows him to share with his existing business with Local Motion.
All right, thank you, sir.
Hey, Preston, did you say that letters went out to the neighborhood
letter, we mailed, Nicole provided that information to me. It was either right at 200 or over 200 letters were mailed to all property owners within 200 feet of the boundary of the rezoning.
It was close to 220, 230 that I ended up doing.
I got a letter from the city at the end of the year. I might think it was a tax bill.
Okay, Wendy, has anybody else called in wishing to speak on this item?
No, ma'am.
No, let's go ahead and close the public hearing then. And I want to open back up for discussion amongst commissioners, questions of staff. Or
Would you like for me to put the plan back up? Put some images back up for you?
I'd like that. Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure. Jamie wants it.
I'm trying to follow along on my iPad, but it's just.
I'll make a quick comment as I've considered this. I certainly understand the concerns of a couple of our commissioners as it applies to parking, you know, at the contiguous properties. And I've actually parked on that street before to go to the Tweetsie Trail. So I think there's some parking going on there already, you know, at flex times or rush hours at the Tweetsie Trail. I think this is going to be could potentially be an asset to the city. I think it will encourage investment in a neighborhood that offers affordable housing already, and could see some major investment in that area, and it would allow more opportunities to have infill and affordable housing in a core in a neighborhood that's in the city core. And so that's just a comment as I consider what could come of this rezoning and potential development.
Yeah, it's Commissioner Whitfield. I must have just missed Commissioner Brock, but I went by there yesterday as well. Just looking at the site, looking at the property, and the property at 640 is pretty dilapidated, and it's an eyesore, and it's definitely dragging down the community right now. I think anything we can do, one, to get rid of an eyesore, but also start building on some capital improvements for the city, especially if we're trying to really present ourselves as being an outdoors destination. This just adds to that. I think it's good for the community. I think it's good for the neighborhood as well. So I'm definitely right now in favor for it.
I would just echo those comments. I think from a standpoint as a person with a young family or young kids, that we love to go to the Tweetsie Trail, having this kind of thing. I've had numerous people comment to me, and my wife and I have commented to each other. It would be so nice if there was additional development right there, or when we got done riding the Tweetsie Trail, we could just hang out and do something, or let the kids do something while Casey and I just sit and kind of talk. And so this is exactly the kind of thing that helps improve that neighborhood and the city as a whole, and would improve, I think, the property values of start the process of improving the property values of that area right there near where the Tweetsie Trail is at. So I would just echo those comments from Clay.
Is there any signage either at the Tweetsie Trailhead or around Locomotion that direct people to the additional parking at the Legion Street lot?
There is.
There is? Okay. I know, because I know whenever, my son runs the Tweetsie Trail for cross country all the time, and we always just use the Legion Street parking lot rather than the trailhead itself. And so I think my concerns regarding parking could be alleviated, if there is signage in the area that directs people to additional parking.
It is right there. It's a green sign that says additional parking down Legion Street with an arrow.
I think it's also just really exciting, and I agree with what Preston said. This is a little node, and if you kind of walk through the neighborhood or walk from under the interstate down Maple to this location, I mean, it's the neighborhood could use some improvement. And I think this node is, as Preston described it, we're just going to see a lot of development there. I think we're really going to raise the values of these homes, and a lot of people in this neighborhood, I think that's their biggest asset is this home. So anything we can do to raise the values of that while keeping them in there, I think is just a boon for them. So yeah, this is a great idea.
I don't have a disagreement with anything that's been said. My only concern is the pump track being in between two residential, homes. And we all could think about that. Do we want a pump track next door where kids are going to be having a great time, and they will, and we know how that is. So that's just my big concern of kind of wedging that in there, and everything else is residential on that side of the street for sure. So that's my concern, and would really want to.
Yeah.
And it is, and Brian, I know how successful it's going to be. And again, I'm not against this project, but I do have an obligation to other citizens in the city as well, and want to just make sure that we've gone our extra step in talking with the neighbors to make sure that they understand what's going to go there. It will be a destination if it's, and particularly however you design the pump track. If it's for younger kids, parents are going to bring them over there. They're going to have a place to park. And we already have parking issues in that area. If you try to go to the Tweetsie Trail, we can't send anybody else who are coming, to this property and think they can park over in the Tweetsie Trail parking lot. It's full all the time. So that's just my concern. And if we can get in there and talk, if 700, let's see, you bought 700, but the one next door, I think you said, or maybe you didn't buy 700. Yeah, you did. If it's owned by a landlord and it's a rental house, I think maybe that's what you said. Just make sure you give them a call and let them know what's going to happen. Now, someone talked about property values. We really don't know. I mean, if you've got a pump track beside your houses, or your property value is going to go up or they're going to go down. I don't know what the answer to that is. And usually you don't know. I mean, we get so many complaints on any kind of project saying it's going to affect my property values. And, some things may and some things may not. So I just don't have those answers really good that I feel, about the outdoor pump track that would create the excitement and everything that goes along with that.
I would echo Jenny's concerns, particularly in light of some of the feedback that we got from the public following the Mountain Home rezoning recently. I think what's important to point out here is that this is a rezoning that is being initiated by the property owner rather than the city. So it's not quite the same thing, even though it's the same rezoning to MX1 as what we approved last month. Some of the comments that were made after that meeting in the local media would not apply here, because this is something that has been initiated by the owner, who is the applicant, rather than the city. But I do share Jenny's concerns about, I'm not sure if I'd want to live next door to a pump track myself. I like the idea of having a place to grab a cup of coffee or to grab a bottle of water or a snack after I've come off of the Tweetsie Trail, or to sit and talk and relax and things like that. But I'm not sure if I'd want to live next to it if it was a pump track.
Preston, perhaps you could help us by describing what some of the requirements of the MX1 zoning are as it applies to buffering, especially considering that an MX1 is going to consistently be adjacent to a residential zone, and speak to us about what it might mean for that buffering, if you would, please, from an MX1 to an R4, as opposed to if it was adjacent to an R1 or R2. Could you speak to us a little bit about that, of what's in our code that could protect property owners, that if we do see some of these node rezonings that could protect the residential zones as far as buffering goes? And maybe that opens up a discussion of us to look at that, to look at some of that code or some of that text.
So specifically the MX1 does not specify particular buffers or screens. However, so therefore it is incumbent upon the property owner and or the developer to identify that on his concept plan. And so what was provided for on the concept plan, I can go back to that. Let me see here. Am I still sharing? Yes, I am still sharing. So let me go back here. He had indicated a 10-foot buffer along with maintaining existing trees. Now, as part of this process, if the developer was to, through the concept plan process, agree to increase that buffer, it would need to be something that would be done voluntarily by the developer. It's really not something that can be imposed on them, but could be voluntarily offered up by the developer, by the property owner, to increase that buffer to ensure that the trees or shrubs are evergreen, something along those lines. Fencing, I believe he had indicated that there would be fencing. So it appears, though, that the bulk of that concern would be on the 700 lot, which is where the small pump track would be located. Something I'm curious about, Brian, if you're still on, I'm just curious about the functionality of a pump track. I'm a mountain biker. I'm a road biker. I've not used pump tracks a whole lot, but my experience with pump tracks is that you generally are pretty limited on how many people can be on it at any given time. Can you speak to the size of the pump track and from a design perspective, what you anticipate in terms of usage?
Sure. The size, we're going back just specifically, not anything near the size of what Tannery Knobs is. This is geared towards small kids. There's a bike shop in Greenville, South Carolina called Piney Mountain Bike Lounge, and they have a huge photo gallery and something. I mean, it's just very small, relatively small. This was just a rough concept of what I've done. It's just a little flowy, nothing drastic. It's again designed for children, and the size of it, with 700 being approximately the lot size of 700 East Maple, the width of the entire lot is only 50 feet. And if my eyeballs were better, I could tell you what the width of 640 is. But we got the structure, so I don't envision this track even being possibly even 40 feet wide, left to right on the property. So relatively small in scale. Piney Mountain over there, they utilize dirt as their product. It's a lot of maintenance, so I was thinking maybe asphalt on what I'm doing, because it could be ready to go quicker for a day after it rains. And just the scale of it is just, please don't have Tannery Knobs as a concept for it, because it's going to be quite a bit, in width-wise, quite a bit smaller, if that answers the question, Preston.
Yeah, that's very, very helpful.
Mr. Winston, got a quick question. In terms of the 700 lot, how far back in that lot will you have to go to put that in?
Jamie, it goes up when the approach of the existing driveway, and hopefully I can utilize part of the retaining wall that's already there and heighten it to a certain degree a little bit to hold back the earth. I think I'm going to be starting somewhere about 40, 45 feet off of the curb of East Maple. And that gives me the width of the slope to a certain degree of the existing grade, and then get the 2 parking spaces there. And then than the pump track. So I'm gonna have to be removing quite a bit of earth, and you'll see that I've got a boulder wall, retaining wall, holding back, and I utilize that in a lot of houses that I build, and implementing back in, earth tones or natural products. And so probably getting somewhere around 45 feet into the property. And then I'll just have to see. I truly don't. I haven't shot elevations. I've had the property surveyed, which is extremely difficult due to the time frame when this was developed. But I don't know, Jamie, exactly how far up I'll go. It's contours are tricky, and that does go uphill quite a bit.
That's what I was going to ask. So from East Pine Street, I can't read the residence numbers for that last house, those last two houses in the cul-de-sac area. Could you just give an estimate of what that elevation change would be? Just ballparking it, or staff? I mean, they're fairly way above you, right?
Up on Taylor Ridge is way, if that's what you're referring to. Taylor Ridge is way, way up there. I think Preston referenced 150 feet of elevation change from the front of 700 to the back of the property line. As far as the adjacent lot, like let's say that's 700, so 702, if that's the correct property address, I'll be behind them, everything that I can envision for the so-called pump track.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, just for clarification on that, that was, if you, looking at the physical characteristics section of your staff report, there's a photograph with contours turned on, and you can see that 145-foot difference between Maple and Taylor Ridge.
Preston, will we, if assuming we approve MX1 tonight, will we subsequently see a concept plan?
This concept plan that's been provided is the concept plan. Concept plans are not required to be engineered. He would be required to provide professional design drawings at the time of permitting. But for the concept plan, it is just that. It is concept, and it can be hand drawn.
But we would not subsequently see, the commission would not subsequently. Okay.
No, sir. No, sir. That's why if there is a wish to ask Mr. Winston if he's able to increase that buffer voluntarily along that southern edge, or provide any other consideration, you could certainly make that request tonight. But again, it would need to be something that he agrees to.
Is it my time to jump in again?
Sure is.
Well, one, I've got to secure this property. So the addition of a privacy fence, which will help deafening or, take the sound down a notch. So of course I'm going to go, I need to secure it from just a liability aspect. And so I would definitely be coming up that left side, putting evergreens in, of course, throughout the calendar year. And I'd be willing to listen and cooperate and do what we have to do for sure.
Ryan, I have a question for you. The pump track, how are you going to control access to it? Are you intending for it to be available for use around the clock, only while you're operating during working hours?
Only during operating hours. No, this is not a public anytime you want to go type thing. Only during operating hours. And we were discussing that last night. I don't have anything set in stone. What I'm trying to wrap my head around as this is coming together is that business hours. Of course, in the spring, we have more hours of daylight leading to summer up until 9:30. I just don't want this to be an open open environment. Probably somewhere we operate again at local motion 9 to 6 daily, and so I'm thinking, maybe coincide with that, but maybe, looking at, beginning this at 11:30 in the morning, and depending on the daylight hours, and the temperatures, of course, and the weather, we're looking at maybe 9 o'clock max in the summertime. So my hours, yes, sir.
For the public safety, how would you plan to keep kids off this pump track during off hours?
There's where the fence comes in. So securing it down with some form of efficient fencing around the perimeter, coming up that left side, and then possibly going through the front parking area, and then just having something where we can, roll it back, some form of, whether that be a privacy fence or something that we can, collapse and bring around to the sides. But I definitely don't want to be open for liability aspects.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
I'd like to make a motion if possible. Motion to approve the rezoning of 640 and 700 East Maple Street from R5 to MX1 and 701 East Maple Street from B3 to MX1.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Whitfield and a second by Commissioner Cooper. Is there any additional discussion on this item?
Can I just ask one additional question?
Certainly.
And Preston can probably answer this, but there along East Maple and the intersection of Alabama Street, I mean, it's still heavy industrial over there right now. I know the Tweetsie Trail obviously is not industrial, but the remainder of that across the street is still pretty heavy industrial use. Is that right?
That is correct. If I go back to the first screen, this, even though this is a Google image, it is accurate in terms of showing the outdoor storage that's there now. And then if I go to the slide where I'm looking northward, there. If you go to the slide where you're looking northward, you can see the outdoor storage of those are really kind of large construction dumpsters. And then you've got this industrial facility here, and all of this is zoned industrial. It's zoned industrial at the center line of East Maple all the way down to Alabama.
I mean, the reason I'm asking, and I know we're about to take a vote, so I don't want to beat a dead horse. I mean, there's already a lot of noise and industrial use going on in this particular area. And I guess I would also, just one other thought I had is that, as we kind of look at the city as a whole, we're going to, as we start kind of looking at transformation of these particular neighborhoods and things, we're going to have to get into residential areas because obviously expanding outward is not the future for the city. So those are just two additional thoughts that I had that I kind of wanted to throw out there before we vote on it.
I would like to just make one other comment before we vote. I spend a lot of time in that area. Is there any way that staff could maybe come up with a concept plan of some sort of traffic calming device coming into that intersection? Because stop signs are not working there, I can tell you that. And I don't know what we could use to put a traffic calming device in, because there will be a lot more pedestrian walking back and forth between the two businesses and on-street parking. So there is just some way of bringing up some sort of traffic calming device prior to that intersection. That'd be great.
Absolutely. And I think, we had touched on that actually last night at the neighborhood meeting, Jamie. There is an opportunity, I think, here, and I certainly don't want to obligate city engineering or public works. I think there's just a responsibility for my department to engage public works and engineering if this moves forward on, what possible pedestrian improvements can be made in that area in partnership with any new development that could potentially widen sidewalks, add crosswalks. I think if this happens and it happens the way that the property owner envisions and the way that we believe from a planning perspective could happen, MX1, we need to follow up from a city perspective on the argument that MX1 and mixed use zoning is pedestrian and bike friendly. And so therefore we need to be a part of that solution.
Well, there's also an opportunity to beautify that whole area. One of the things I think about is that's the final leg for the turkey trot as well. So if you could widen the one sidewalk or the other, like an 8-foot, narrow the road, 8-foot pedestrian bike walkway, that would really enhance the neighborhood, I think. And it kind of solve the traffic issue.
Yes.
Okay, is there additional discussion? All right, hearing none, we have a motion on the table to rezone 640 and 700 East Maple Street from R5 to MX1 and 701 East Maple Street from B3 to MX1. Nicole, would you please take a vote?
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mays,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
You're muted, Jamie. Jamie, you're still muted.
Yes.
okay, Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
I'm sorry, was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Commissioner Brock,
I'm going to abstain. I'm not going to vote yes or no, but it will come before the commission anyway, so I'll get on it again. And Brian and to Preston, please bring some documentation about the neighborhood meetings so that we can see how the neighbors are going to react to this. And I think it's a great project. I love it, but I have to look out at this other stuff too, so I'm abstaining.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Wild.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay. Well, thank you, Brian. We appreciate your being with us to answer questions. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it very much. And I look forward to it if all goes well. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the next item under new business is item 6.3. It's a bond variance. It's to consider granting a variance to the Johnson City Subdivision Regulations to allow for temporary acceptance of a performance bond in the amount of $389,000 for Chestnut Cove Phase 1.
Thank you, Dr. Wild. I don't have a presentation on this. It would really be kind of pointless to do a PowerPoint. I will just touch on a couple of highlights from the staff report. I'm sure all of you have read your backup material. You may recall that in December of last year, Chestnut Cove Phase 1 came to you for a request for final plat approval. As a condition of that approval, you granted them the ability to post a $500,000 bond for public improvements. You also granted authority to staff to reduce that bond as necessary in advance of the recordation of the plat. Since that meeting, the developer has completed a number of improvements. which has allowed the bond to be reduced from $500,000 down to $389,000. Still a significant, sizable bond. Our current requirements under the subregs are that bonds be provided only in two forms, that being cash or a letter of credit. A cash bond in somebody writing a check to the city for $389,000 is highly unlikely. And a letter of credit can be very difficult as well, in that it ties up or binds any credit that a builder or developer has access to for a number of reasons. And so this particular developer has sought a performance bond. One thing I do want to add is that performance bonds are accepted by the city in a multitude of other projects in public works and other departments. So if you were to grant this, you are not granting a performance bond. This is not the first time this will be used in the city. Public works and city engineering accepts performance bonds for other projects. It just so happens that the subregs prohibited performance bonds a number of years ago. And it was really based on a particular project, which is unfortunate, and something that I'd really like to engage the city attorney with in conversation about. How do we find a way to allow performance bonds in the future over a certain dollar amount, over $250,000, something like that. But that's a conversation to be had with the city attorney later. In this particular case, rather than just simply asking you to blindly or blanketly grant the variance, we are asking, and we've had conversation with the developer about this. He is in agreement with this proposal. Staff's recommendation is that you allow for the $389,000 performance bond, which is essentially just like an insurance policy. And then upon the first reduction of that bond amount, because you'll note in the staff report that, let me see here, there is a large chunk that is tied up in just two items. $126,000 in sidewalks, and I believe $92,000 in paving. When those two items are complete and the first reduction comes in, we then would ask that it be converted to a letter of credit. So that's in the second to last paragraph here on the staff report. And so then the recommendation, staff recommends the Planning Commission grant conditional approval. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading from the last staff report, forgive me. Forgive me. But the recommendation is that you allow for the $389,000 performance bond, and upon the first reduction, convert it to a letter of credit. Thank you.
Preston, can you please share with me what has allowed the bond to be reduced by staff from the $500,000 to the current $389,000? Because when we considered this last month, it was my understanding that the paving equipment was on site and ready to go, that they were merely waiting for a day without rain or cold, and that the majority of this paving and sidewalk would have been completed by now. So I'm a little confused. What has allowed for the current reduction compared to what you all consider is going to be a significant new reduction as soon as additional paving is done?
Well, first off, if you reference the staff report that was provided to you, and I go down to page 4 of 12, page 4 of 12 and 5 of 12, I'm getting feedback from someone. 4 of 12 and 5 of 12 are the estimate sheets. Those are the reduction sheets that are provided by Paul Easlick in City Engineering. You are correct. At the December meeting, there was paving equipment staged out there ready to pave, and it did just that. It paved the majority of Brummett Court. There's still just a little bit of paving left. That's why the paving is such a small amount. The paving itself is $92,000. But the sidewalk which is concrete, is 126,000, and the sidewalk had not yet been completed. So the staging of the paving equipment, that was used. And they got that done when it was warm enough to get out there in good weather. And so that's why it's been able to be reduced to 389. But they do still have $92,000 worth of paving left. And all of this is very normal, especially for any large scale subdivision, multi-lot subdivision. The thing that is abnormal, I wouldn't say abnormal, but is a little different is the size of the bond. It is a sizable bond. And so in this particular case, the developer requesting for a performance bond for the 389 is not unreasonable, not something that would be considered unusual. It would be unusual to write a $389,000 cash check to the city.
Was the developer unaware of the form of bond payment at the last meeting? Because my understanding again was that he indicated, and he was with us during that meeting, that he was comfortable with the $500,000 bond at that time.
You're right. I do recall him saying he was comfortable with the dollar amount. I had provided to him both email and verbal communication of our different forms of or what the subregs allow for bonding. And then after Christmas, when we all came back into the office, he had indicated that he needed to seek a performance bond.
If you remember, one of the reasons he's in this position is because he was anxious to meet the year-end deadline so he could sell his lots. Is that not correct? So this is a very unusual circumstance that basically we have accommodated him at least in that regard. And performance bonds, at least based on my experience, are more related to contracts, and we don't have a contract with this developer. I really think we need, at least my opinion, we need to either require a cash bond or require a letter of credit. Letter of credit, if nothing else, it's very easy for us to call any funds that we may require from that letter of credit, whereas a performance bond, it's much more complicated to retrieve funds.
Preston, a question about other city departments that would need to review this. Is there a requirement? Has finance looked at it, or legal?
There's not a requirement, no ma'am, but engineering has reviewed this, and engineering has, well, I don't want to speak for engineering, but they have been a part of this review and not indicated any concern, so to speak, especially since they accept performance bonds for other projects.
I'm by no means bond counsel, although I have a little more experience of this just by virtue of my time in the county attorney's office. Bonds, from a improvement standpoint, I know for the county roads department, bonds have historically been what have been used in almost every instance. And I remember talking a couple years ago about starting to use letters of credit and other things that were sometimes a little bit easier to use for smaller amounts, like $50,000 or $40,000 worth of improvements that needed to be made. And so I just wanted to offer that kind of insight. I think from, obviously from a state road contract, there are almost exclusively performance bonds that the state requires, or that the public entity for most public projects at a state level are bonded, and through performance bonds as well. And the other thing, and Public Works may be able to speak better to this than me, but if there's only about $389,000 worth of work remaining, I don't believe that the insurance company would allow them to bond $500,000. So those are the only points I just kind of wanted to make.
Preston, do we need to open a public hearing on this item?
No, ma'am, it is not required.
Okay.
And
Kristen, can you walk through why staff is recommending a conversion from a performance bond to an LC at 170 when there's $175,000 of work remaining? I might have missed that. If I did, I'm sorry.
Sure. No, what we were simply trying to do there is really honestly not put you in a position or in an uncomfortable position to have to grant a performance bond for the life of the surety. In our conversation with the developer, they understood that and agreed that at the time that it could be first reduced. And by removing the 126 and the 92 for sidewalks and paving, you'll note there on page 3 of 12, it reduces it to, roughly $170,000. And at that time, it could be converted. So again, our intent was to not put the planning commission in a position where you're having to grant the variance for the life of the surety. It would be a temporary ask, so to speak. And then when that first reduction comes in this spring, that it be converted.
Is our agreement, if we decided to do this, could it be perceived as showing any type of favoritism to this particular developer? Because it seemed rather unusual last month in my mind that we allowed for them to go ahead and proceed with the sale of those lots, and we were attempting to accommodate the developer in that respect. And so now we have this ask coming before us. Could there be any perception that we're potentially granting things for this developer that we would not typically grant for others?
No, ma'am. And simply because this is not precedent setting. Each ask that comes before you is unique and individual and subject to the information and evidence that is brought in front of you each and every time. Land use decisions are contextual. They're not precedent setting. I know they feel like they are, but they are contextual. The other is that from a subdivision plating perspective, in a community this size, 70,000 or so folks, you have just a small handful of developers and design professionals that we work with, meaning you as well, on a daily basis. So we have a small handful of folks that we work with on a regular basis, and that would scale up and down as you get into a large city like Knoxville, or you get into a smaller town like Greenville. It's going to scale up and down. I think that you are going through the correct process and procedure. You're considering this in an open meeting and having open dialogue and discussion. And so if you were to grant this, it would not be considered unusual or preferential. The other thing to note and keep in mind is that you did not step outside of any bounds in December when you granted conditional approval of that final plat. This body has multiple times granted conditional approval of final plats subject to issuance of a bond.
Preston, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If we move forward with a performance bond, are the terms already drafted, or if they're not drafted, who would be drafting the terms for our side, on the city's behalf?
They have been drafted, and that's been provided to you in your staff report. And that language was reviewed and was carefully reviewed, I can say, just because even though I was out on sick leave, I understand that there was quite a bit of conversation back and forth between the developer and city engineering. And so I understand that the city engineer, Alan Cantrell, had a say in how it was put together.
Yeah, Alan's in the meeting. Alan, why don't you kind of weigh in on this and maybe help us get over the hump here and
sure.
So we move on.
On the fairness question, I brought up a list of subdivisions with bonds that go back quite a ways. 145,000 is the largest bond that we have had between now and 2013. Somewhere around 2013 is when we eliminated the surety bond from the list. So all the bonds from then forward are all less than 100,000 except for 3. So letters of credit were easily done. Way back when we were doing the ridges, we would see $300,000 bonds. I think when we were doing, the developer was doing gates at Highland Ridge, we saw some $400,000 bonds, but those are 15 years or 20 years ago. Surety bonds were allowed then, and all of those were done by surety bonds. So what I'm saying is most of the bonding that's been done in the past 7 years or so has been done with letter of credit, but all small amounts, 10,000, 5,000, I'm looking at 15,000. Finally, I see 139, and then I go all the way back to 2013, I see 145, and that was when they started Cedar Rock Village. And before that, they were surety bonds. So in fairness, all the people who did large bonds did them with surety bonds. And we've not had large bonds in recent years. What was the question again about the language on the surety?
I think
if it was already drafted.
They sent over what the insurance office uses as a template, and they just filled in the blanks. I looked at the language there. It still had references to Washington County that needed to be cut out of there and turned over, references made to city of Johnson City. There's some unnecessary language in there about some issues that did not relate to this project at all. So we cut that out. I did not have access to Sonny, our attorney, to have her check it. So, and I'm not an attorney, but I did edit the thing. I basically retyped it. It was a very, you know how a form will get copied and copied over until it just looks like it's going off the edge of the page. It looked that ugly. So we retyped it, eliminated all these bad references to the other agency and put ourselves in there. And I'm comfortable with what it says. I made sure to list all of the items that are covered by this bond so that it's not a general statement referring to work. And then you got to guess what the work means. It lists each item that's missing. So I'm happy with the bond language.
And Alan, just for clarification, surety and performance bonds are interchangeable, that terminology?
Yes, performance bond can be a letter of credit or a cash bond. You're bonding the performance. The surety means that, like Preston said, it's coming through an insurance company.
Okay. Thank you.
My experience, typically a bond is going to be more cost effective than a letter of credit generally. So I think this could be seen as being developer friendly.
What happened in our case, a little bit of history, and then I'll make it really brief. Princeton Gardens is a private street. It still has a bond on it on phase 2 of about $75,000. And that's for the final asphalt. And the first phase was bonded, and phase 2 was not started. And it went bankrupt. And we needed to get that paved. So we called the bond on that one. Our legal staff at the time did the work to get that surety bond money here. It took a lot of effort. It was only for $45,000. the effort to get $45,000 was quite a bit of effort. And his recommendation to us after that was to eliminate the surety bonds because of the effort. Well, when it's a larger amount, such as 400,000 in that range, the ratio between the effort to get it called and the amount that you're calling in is smaller. So the effort spent to bring in a small amount of money, it just wasn't worth it.
Alan, who's put forth that effort?
That was our staff attorney at the time.
So it's House Counsel.
Yes. Now that effort brought in $45,000. And so the point is that the surety bond is, I think someone said this earlier, and I agree with them, is more targeted for large numbers. And the letters of credit cash bonds are for these smaller bonds. But we don't have that option anymore since we changed the text some 7 or 8 years ago.
Is that something that you would advise this committee looks into the text of that and potentially changing it back for the future? I mean,
Yes,
not tonight, obviously, but is that something?
The text just simply listed three ways to do a bond, and it was easy to fix the text. We went in and took one line out. But I think if you put something back, we ought to consider at what point are we going to allow a surety bond to be triggered? Is there a dollar amount that we go over that a surety bond becomes the instrument that we want? And below there, we're okay with the others. So I think that I would add that to anything that comes back into the text.
Preston, perhaps when we have staff back in place, I know you all are overwhelmed right now and understaffed, but perhaps that should be added to the to-do list that staff should consider altering that language and give us a report on that to discuss in the future.
Yes, ma'am. And that was one of the things that we had indicated that we wanted to talk to this staff attorney about.
Okay. All right. Is there additional discussion on this item? Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion, please.
Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the request for bond variance for Chestnut Grove Phase 1 with the Shadden Springs Partnership.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Brock and a second by Commissioner Mays. Is there additional discussion or questions at this time? Hearing none, Nicole, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mays,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
You're muted, Jamie.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Brock,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Wild.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right. Our last item under new business is item 6.4, and this is the bridge plan pre-read document. And Kelly, I believe you're on for this one.
Hey, you all can see my screen and you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, great. Okay, so you all received the documents in your packet. There were links to view the documents online because they're quite large, so pretty impossible to send via email. Just want to note that this is the first time you all are seeing this document kind of polished and compiled into one single document, but you all have seen these working elements. The committee for sure has seen these working elements across 2020, and then you all saw them at your November meeting as well. And just want to make sure everybody received, no one had any issues with opening the links.
Hey, Chairman. I'm sorry, Chair Kelly, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Sure, no.
I think this is going to be pretty long, and I'm excited about listening to it. Is there any way we can take like a 5-minute recess or a 2-minute recess?
Sure. I think,
Is that okay? with
I
the
think
other
that's
commissioners?
appropriate. Let's
Or I
call
can just
for.
excuse myself, either one.
Is there anybody else that needs a recess at this time?
Sure.
All right, let's reconvene. I'm looking at the official time. I've got 7:51. How about we say it's 7:55? We will reconvene, and everybody just block your camera and your sound if you decide to leave.
Thank you for the indulgence.
You're most welcome. It's a shame Mr. Mize didn't invite us all to dinner earlier.
It shouldn't be too long.
I was gonna say,
Just,
it looks.
just out of curiosity, does anyone, like the property that is across from the bike shop, that's the industrial, is it still in use or is it for sale, or does anyone have any idea?
Are you talking about OmniSource?
Where those storage containers were stored, and then
Yeah,
closer
it's still
to-
in use.
no, the one
Oh,
closer to
yeah,
Regent.
absolutely.
Is there any way we can lease that lower part for parking the city?
You notice they've put up signs since the Tweetsie Trail because people were parking over there, and they're pretty adamant about not parking in their private property.
Very good.
While we're waiting, I'll just reiterate to everyone again what I tried to send out in a memo last week is don't be scared by the size of this document. It is beautifully presented now, and Kelly did an absolutely phenomenal job with it. But this is the exact same document that we reviewed extensively in our November meeting. So don't want to scare anybody off.
Right.
Oops, somebody must be walking by. Okay, Kelly, it looks like we have all but one commissioner back. So
okay,
I'm going to say, let's go ahead and resume our meeting and let you get started with this presentation.
Okay, thank you. And I will say also, not to trivialize, this is an incredibly important document and an incredibly important thing for you all to consider. But I did know that this was, the last on a pretty long agenda. So crafted the presentation so that it wouldn't be too long. And also knowing that you all have seen this document before, it's basically just a new packaging of it. Okay, so just want to give you a little overview of what I'm going to cover. Again, it's a quick presentation. First, just a little introduction about how we got here. I know we have at least one new commissioner, so just wanted to make sure that we establish that sort of baseline for a little bit of background information. Two, we wanted to break down all of the elements and just kind of give you a quick overview of what they are, and then a really boiled down version of the important part, which is what has changed. You all, of course, reviewed this at your November meeting, and you all also received a separate document in addition to the draft plan that summarizes each element and the major changes in each. So there's all of the sort of substantive things that have changed are outlined for you there. And I just want to quickly go over those things in case you didn't have a chance to look at those summary sheets. I'm sure everyone read the whole 100 pages though in the last week. And then last, just next steps. Commissioner Dagenhart and I spoke a little bit yesterday about, next steps and where we go from here. So just a quick sort of discussion of that. Okay, so first, for any of you who don't know, over the course of last year, the Development Services Department organized and led a complete review of Johnson City's 2020 Comprehensive Plan. That was a 15-year plan divided into 8 different elements and sub-elements, and they were all adopted. Interestingly, the elements were adopted individually over the last 15 years within a year or so. So this effort has been to really review that plan, seeing as though we're coming to the end of it. We're coming to 2020 we kind of lived out the document. So the idea was to review it and see where we stood. The purpose was to essentially create a 5-year extension of the comprehensive plan, thus the term the bridge plan. It is not a new plan. It is simply an extension of the plan that existed so that we have this sort of transition document to take us from the termination of, or the end of the existing plan, knowing that we will be embarking on a new comprehensive plan endeavor in 5 years. And we also just wanted to note that we really focused on simply the recommendations section of the comprehensive plan. There was a lot of data and analysis and statistics and things that we did not go into with this review. So it just takes a fresh look at this document. The idea was to ensure relevance and effectiveness as it continues to provide guidance to decision makers for this additional 5-year period. It is a really well-written document, and many of the aspects of it are still very relevant. in many cases just as much now as they were 15 years ago. And with 2020 being a census year, the commission elected to have this bridge plan serve as a transition document until the new census can be made available, and that data can really serve as a baseline for a new comprehensive planning endeavor. And also just to note, the crafting of this document was conducted by the planning division staff, as well as the long range planning committee and of the Regional Planning Commission, and in consultation and collaboration with more than a dozen partner organizations. So where there are specific areas of expertise where, you know, planning is not the go-to for that area, you know, the experts in those particular elements have been consulted, and those are detailed in your introduction. And also all the contact information for those folks who were involved in the review. And then just a little bit about how the plan is structured. So we have these different levels of content. The first being goals and objectives. These are the big picture vision type statements that really lay out where the city wants to go, how the city sees itself in the future and the present. And those are the goals and objectives portion of the plan. No changes were made to those. The committee really felt like that was beyond the scope of this work, and that is something that should really be reevaluated in 5 years after this extension. Then below goals and objectives are policies. No real substantive changes were made there. There were some changes simply to, you know, remove things that were no longer relevant, or update an organization that may no longer exist or may have changed names. Simple minor revisions like that were made at that level. And then the next level is the actions items. And these are the content that really guides decision making when you have a zoning change that comes before you, or some other land use request that comes before you. You know, the staff is going to be looking at these action items to ensure that the requests are consistent with, of course, with the goals and objectives and policies as well, but also with those action items. And that's where most of the modifications were focused. And again, those were relatively minor. Of course, anything that was irrelevant or outdated was removed. There were some additions, and we'll go through those quickly in the next slides. So the first element is your urban growth and services element. And this really just is, how do we grow thoughtfully? How do we as a city grow in a way that is, you know, ethical and responsible and considers how we can provide services if we are to grow? The only real changes to highlight here is the introduction of the urban neighborhood zoning to promote infill development. So this is a zoning classification that would be specific to the areas of the city that were built prior to 1960. So those kind of urban residential neighborhoods, and to create a zoning district that would be sensitive to that would, you know, accommodate things like density and reduce setbacks and the types of things that you find in these urban residential districts. This doesn't create that zoning district, it just creates this classification that would then guide the creation of that district. There were some changes in state law that were acknowledged, and then also the introduction of the existing de-annexation policy. The next element is land use. This is definitely the meatiest of all of the elements. I think you all know what land use is. You know, how do we regulate the use of land in an orderly and ethical way? The main things, again, are that urban residential zoning classification that I talked about before, the addition of terms like traditional urban form, you know, really kind of defining what we mean by that when we use those types of terms. And the other big element of this is supporting efforts to make Johnson City a destination for outdoor recreation. So making sure that all of our decision-making going forward keeps that goal in mind. Next is transportation, and there are 4 subplans within this element: sidewalks, major thoroughfare, public transit, and bikeway greenway. The only real additions in this element are the potential development of a fee system for resident requested sidewalk projects. So when a resident would like a sidewalk improvement and they're not where they would like to be on the list, that they could potentially use a fee system to get that project going sooner. Other municipalities have done this with success. Creating a catalog of existing substandard streets and other transportation types of improvements that are needed. Identification of opportunities for road diets, and the creation of a bicycle greenway master plan. Those are our additions. I don't think there were any omissions. Most of it was still quite relevant. For economic development, of course, this is just enhancing the prosperity and quality of life for Johnson City's residents. We removed lots of boards and organizations were listed in there that are no longer in existence. And then there are some new boards and organizations that we wanted to include. So that was a good bit of the changes. Directing resources toward locally owned businesses, really trying to focus on that. And also the support of efforts of the Convention and Visitors Bureau to host national sporting events in the city as a way of expanding our economic base. The next element is housing. And this is all about providing an adequate supply of diverse housing to meet current and future needs of the residents of the city. Additions are better cooperation between developers and housing agencies in the development of affordable housing. Some zoning amendments are recommended to reduce confusion about housing types, and then improved connectivity and walkability within neighborhoods. And then there's also an action item to have properties that are set for tax auction to be offered to housing agencies as a first option, which is something that other cities have also seen a lot of success with. The next element is community facilities. So these are your parks and schools, city-owned buildings and sites. This was, just really a cleanup, the removal of action items that have already been implemented. Also some additions about greater protection for our riparian corridors and ridge lines and creeks. Really encouraging coordination between the city and Johnson City Public Schools, and then also expanding our neighborhood scale parks in underserved areas. And then next we have downtown revitalization. An interesting change was made there. There was a provision that discouraged first floor residential uses in downtown, and a lot of zoning codes have this provision, and a lot of comp plans as well. And they're changing that to allow for first floor residential with just changing needs and changing markets. So we recommended not necessarily encouraging them, but just allowing for first floor residential uses to really promote a dynamic mixed use environment downtown. The encouragement of grocers or small markets to locate in the downtown core. So again, that focus on local businesses, particularly in downtown. Improve pedestrian access to parking structures. I know that is at least a perceived deficit in downtown, that we don't have access to our parking structures. Aligning the small cell antenna ordinance with downtown aesthetics, making sure that doesn't compromise the fantastic aesthetics of downtown Johnson City. Encouraging public art, and also the preservation of existing brick-lined streets. And then lastly, we have historic preservation. You all have done such an amazing job with historic preservation in Johnson City. Several other municipalities in East Tennessee that I've worked for looked to Johnson City for what you all have done. So there wasn't a lot of substantive changes here, mainly focusing on just greater awareness of the fantastic historic resources that Johnson City has. greater awareness of, the tax incentives and grants that are available, because we have a lot of assets that are also in National Register districts. And then, just encouraging events as well to increase public awareness of, I think a lot of times there's a perception that preservation means an infringement of rights or a lot of costly requirements. So just spreading some awareness that oftentimes this improves property values and is not as onerous as a lot of people might think. Okay, so next steps. As you can read in your staff packet, we are recommending tabling formal adoption of this at this time because we're mostly done, but there are a couple of things that need to be ironed out. Some really simple things, like we're waiting on a few maps from GIS. We have a couple of images that need to be updated and some rearranging to do formatting wise. There are a few comments that, me not being in Johnson City, I didn't feel comfortable resolving on my own and didn't have the time to organize a meeting around it to figure out how to resolve those comments. Just to speak to the comments for the last month, Chairman Wild and Commissioner Degenhart and I have been combing through this document and doing a really thorough copy edit. But of course, we found some other things as well, like, wait a second, does this make sense? And going through that whole process. So there were some comments that came out of that process that I would like some more input from the committee before I check them off as resolved. And then finally, also, there is no sort of conclusion or wrap up. And Commissioner Degenhart and I were talking about the need for that. There's also been, this was something that Mr. Manley worked on before he kind of handed the baton to me, an emerging themes or overarching themes and emerging topics document where the work of the committee, whenever things like, well, what about social distancing? What about, much more kind of relevant, up-to-date themes came out of this. Mr. Manley compiled those in a document as a sort of placeholder for these are the things that we need to look at in 2025. So we were thinking that an appropriate place for that might be in a conclusion, kind of wrap up element of the plan. So that is it. And I will definitely rely on Dr. Wild and Chris for any not any, but maybe for some questions that I may be too new to Johnson City to answer, but of course, happy to do my best.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm going to hand this over to Commissioner Degenhart for a few minutes because he chaired the Bridge Plan Committee, and he has probably worked harder on it than anyone other than you, Kelly, putting this together. And we really do appreciate the job you've done. But I think he would be the most appropriate to lead off some comments and then open the floor for discussion and questions.
Well, one point
Chris.
Thank you, Chairperson. One point that I want to make is there's two values that I've seen come from the work on reviewing and digesting the whole comprehensive plan and structuring the bridge plan. And the two dimensions to that, one is the great amount of guidance and detail that it provides leaders and those of us in the city who have to make choices about how we grow and what we put emphasis on and where we make investments. So there's specific guidance built into this document. But alongside that is just simply the awareness and the understanding of what long-term planning and strategic vision has to offer us for where we want our community to grow into. So I want us to make sure that we keep our eyes focused on the details and then the bigger picture of this helps us understand what we're trying to develop into. Another thing that has come about is the development at the city commission level of the strategy plan for the city through the eyes of the city commission, and the complete synchronization of that city strategic plan with this bridge plan and comprehensive plan. They're quite complementary of each other. One sets a very clear tone about where the city wants to grow and where it wants to place emphasis. And the bridge plan, comprehensive plan creates a lot more tactical information about choices that we have to make those visions come to light and come to fruition. Another thing, and this is very simple, making it a readable document. And I want to thank Kelly for the beautiful work that she's done to take a very dry and a very dull typed document that we started with and create it into a document that's pleasing to look at, and it's pleasing to understand, and pleasing to read, and pleasing to digest. So I think that's a huge improvement as well. As simple as that seems, I think it's quite important. So I'd like to open it up to the whole committee to ask questions, to make comments. Hopefully you've had some opportunities to digest the document in its current form.
Dr. Wild and Committee Chair Dagenhart, if I could just expand just for a second on something you were saying there, Chris. Not only is it important, it is critical. And the reason why it is critical that something as simple, and I don't use that term lightly, as design, is because it facilitates consumption. That's something that many planning departments and private planners that is an ongoing conversation about the importance of converting comprehensive plans, long-range plans from essentially a book, a black and white text book that was traditionally done in the past, to something that is easily consumed by the general public. Not everybody speaks this language. Not everybody understands our acronym soup and all of the things that we talk about on a daily basis. And so for someone who's particularly, let's say somebody's moving to a new community and they want to understand what are the goals and objectives of this community. Well, 25, 30 years ago, if you wanted to understand the goals and objectives of a community, you would have to pick up this document that was really nerve-inducing, so to speak, to try to understand. And it is very much a part of the conversation now with comprehensive plans that they be easily consumed and easily understood. And that is not just important, that is critical, and something that we will continue as we move forward with the comp plan updates.
Probably the one more thing that I would add, and I would speak for the committee, but I would ask them to speak for themselves as well, and that's Jamie and Clay and Stacy. This effort over the last year has brought me to an awakening of what recognizing the great value that the Planning Commission brings transactionally to the community for things that we see routinely. But it makes me more aware of the potential that we could have, the much greater potential we can have at the Planning Commission to help shepherd choices that will lead to the right growth opportunities and growth patterns for our community. So I think there's an opportunity for us to think differently, think beyond the transactional set of choices that we typically make in a meeting, and look at opportunities where we can have discussions and provide a forum inside the community to consider strategic choices that will be much more tuned into the long-range plans of our city to make this the most comfortable and enjoyable place to live and work.
Yeah, I agree, Chris. That was the main takeaway for me during this process is that there's a place for the Planning Commission to foster this plan over these next 5 years, but maybe more importantly to reposition ourselves, as a body that can support the different objectives and the different departments around the city as we attempt to stay on track, because so much can get lost in the sauce, if you know what I mean. And so I'm particularly excited that that's the direction that the Planning Commission and its leaders have decided to go, and look forward to being a part of that as we implement this bridge plan over the next 5 years and begin to plan for the next comprehensive plan for the city. So I've been humbled to be a part of the process and appreciate your leadership through that process, Chris.
Thank you.
And I'll just echo Clay's comments. Chris and Kelly have just really taken the lead on this and have done an exceptional job. And as far as the Planning Commission moving forward, I think we all have to take some ownership of this bridge plan and our decisions that we make for the community. So I encourage us all to read it and understand it and use it as we move forward in making decisions on our city. So thanks again.
Dr. Wild, and could we get back on the screen again so we can all see each other?
Sure, sorry.
That's all right.
There we go.
There we go.
Mhm.
First and foremost, I want to thank the Planning Commission for the committee who's been working on this a long time. This is an amazing document. And I think I'd had a conversation with Stacy and Chris some time ago when, we completed our strategic plan from a commission standpoint. And the conversation really started about, well, where was the Planning Commission? Why weren't we a part of this? And the only thing I could do is apologize. And I kind of described it like this, that, and y'all alluded to it just a minute ago. The Planning Commission for a number of years has been very effective, but it's been very transactional. And so it wasn't operating at this level now that where we see it going. And so it was just like, no, I mean, it wasn't intentional. It was just that we didn't think about it. Now, where do we go from here? This document really fills in a lot of things into the commission's kind of big, broad strategy that we've come up with. And if you haven't seen the document that the City Commission has come out with, it's on our webpage, and please do. And there are really 4 big buckets. Economic vitality. I mean, we can expand that all day long. We can talk for many hours on that. We call the next one quality of place. We can't give anybody quality of life, but we can create an environment here. And my computer may go off here in just a second. But it's really about the built environment, what we do, how we actualize the natural assets that we have here, but how we build into that too. Future ready infrastructure. These are big, big items right here. We have to have the infrastructure in place to attract business and people and be modern, And then the last thing is just effective government, how we can be more responsive, how we can work with our constituents in a way that they can trust and count on government to do the things that government is supposed to do. So within that, then our next step was to get our community partners back together, which we are planning that meeting. Final date hasn't been set, but I think it's going to be the first part of February to look at the commission plan and then to see where everybody begins to plug in. So those community partners are JCDA, NetRep, the Chamber, the CVB, somebody else was around, and the Planning Commission will be there. So then we kind of look at, because everybody has these attributes and things that they can say, well, here's, the goals we set for 2021, these are things we're going to be doing anyway, but here's some things that we need to be able to expedite that or to make that more realistic that we can deliver. So I'm really looking forward to that meeting. And I think then we take our strategic plan to the next level of really setting those very key objectives and deliverables that we will begin to move forward on. So anyway, I just want to say I'm really thrilled that y'all have been doing this work. It takes everything to a new level, and I think you know, the city's a lot better off because of it, and we'll move forward. Am I
Jenny,
still on?
I hope you can see Kelly's screen. I took the liberty to
I
develop
did see that. Yeah, I
an
looked through that.
interface
Yeah. Mhm.
of the city strategic plan and the 4 elements that Jenny described and mentioned and discussed, and the elements of the bridge plan, and just see where they overlap and touch each other. And this table shows you just how much there is consistency between the strategic vision and the tactical, specific, detailed level of detail that's in our hands in the content of the bridge plan and comprehensive plan. So I would like to suggest that this be part of this meeting in early February.
That sounds good. Let me add one final comment. When we were talking about the level of work that the Planning Commission is starting to do now, I can't go back and recall any strategic plan that the commission has ever done. So we're kind of in some good uncharted territory, and we have to use this. We have such challenges in front of us. Right now, it's economic recovery. And then what our economic long-range plan is for sustainability and growth of our community. So we've got some big things we have to address and get on with, but these are the challenges in front of us, and at least we are beginning to get a roadmap in place that can help guide us. And Chris, to your point too, the investments, the strategic investments are absolutely critical. Where we're investing our money for the best return. How we make the decisions on streets, on sidewalks, on those kind of things. There's another project going on. It's called EDI. It's an educational program that's coming out of ETSU with Lottie Ryans, who's in workforce development. And it's a mapping project, and they have studied the city-wide and looked at assets that we have in the city, and they've mapped that to readiness achievement levels of kindergartners. And so what you're beginning to see now is this map of saying, you know, some of our lowest performing children who are our future are coming from these neighborhoods, and let's see what we have there or don't have there is really what the question is. And so how do we then begin to plan capital budgets to address those things? You know, we have neighborhoods that, you know, they're driving 2 miles to get to a grocery store. There's no pharmacy close by. There's no playgrounds close by. So it's really going to give us a lot of data, quantitative data, that we can begin to make decisions by, that will just kind of bring all the areas of our city up to where we want them all to be. But it's exciting, and I'm number one, I'm really glad to be back on the Planning Commission. I hope y'all, I was on it a few years ago with Jamie and Bob Cooper. So we go back then, but I think this is going to be exciting work, and I'm looking forward to working on both sides of this. So that's it.
We're pretty happy to have you back, Jenny.
Here, here.
So
I don't see a thing in it that needs to be changed. I think the next step is to now bring it. We need to get the commission back reoriented again, probably before that meeting, make sure they get this in hand and see the compatibility of it. Kelly, you did a fantastic job of putting this together. And you know, one of the things too about selling your plan, your strategic plan, is that it's a very friendly and user-friendly document. And y'all seen the city strategic plan, and it's you know, it's fun. It has great pictures in it, and people are much more likely to look at it and read it rather than that black and white on a sheet of paper.
Absolutely.
But it also, you know, these are documents then that we are sending out.
Right.
You know, we're posting on our website. This needs to get posted on the website, that potential, you know, people coming here will download it and they go like, wow, that is cool. And guess what picture is going to be added to ours? Christmas in the park.
Yay!
Oh my God. The Christmas trees and the light and everything just speaks volumes about our city.
So awesome.
And what a cool place we are. So anyway, I'll be quiet. Everybody else talk now. And I'm afraid my computer's going to go off. I have it plugged in, but it doesn't seem to be charging, but I've got 8%.
Dr. Wild, was it be appropriate to open for any public comment that there is to collect, to listen to?
Do we need to have a public hearing on this at this point, Preston?
You had advertised, you did the 30-day advertisement for public comment. It's not the same thing as a public hearing.
Public meeting is
for
comment.
a rezoning, right? But it would be appropriate to open it for any public comment.
Okay, well, Wendy, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and put up the screen with the phone number as we continue to talk. In case anybody does wish to join us, we would certainly welcome any comment. I believe the recommendation tonight is not that we act upon this yet, but merely we're gathering input from other commissioners who haven't seen it in this format before. And I'm not going to put the cart before the horse, but this is going to lead beautifully into the next item that's going to come up, which is going to be our setting a date for a retreat. This certainly is going to be one of the top items to be discussed at that retreat, because there's a lot of recommendations that are coming out of this. The big primary one is that the Planning Commission does take a more strategic role in our future. That we continue the transactional role we've had, but that we become more strategic in nature. And so my intent at the retreat is going to be, one, to gain everybody's feedback on that, not just the committee members who served on the Bridge Plan Committee and seem to be in favor of that, but I want to get everyone's input. And then also to try to map out, how do we do that? What do we want to achieve and how do we go? So
one topic, Dr. Wild, I wanted to mention, and that's a door that we've opened through the process of building the bridge plan, and that is to develop contacts and connections and communications with lots of partner organizations across the city of Johnson City. And I think that's going to be a vehicle, a very important vehicle for us to be able to bring the vision that's built into this bridge plan to life. Because the Planning Commission has very limited capacity to impact change. We can make choices and make specific decisions, but there are other bodies that it's their mission to actually work in the areas where we discuss topics within the bridge plan. So we need to get that dialogue going and making careful choices about which are the most important ones to start first. That may be a topic for one of our retreat topics.
I agree.
Chris and Kelly, I have a quick question. I was reading through the plan yesterday, and I did not get through the whole 125 pages. But I just was coming across different things, and I just had separate questions. And is there someone that I should be reaching out to when I have a question, or like, what does this mean, or what are we intending by this or referencing? Should I be coming to you, Kelly, for this, or that was my question, is who should be going to with these questions?
Sure. I think Chris and I are probably most intimately familiar with it. So you could start with me, and if I need to involve Chris, if I can't answer it, then I can do that.
And I would also ask for Jamie, because of his deep experience and history with the Planning Commission, he would be a resource to help interpret questions or choices or implications of particular policies that are articulated in the bridge plan. But I would be happy to be that starting point for a question.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I was, I'm makes me feel old. I'm not really great at reading these things online, especially a document that's this large. So I'm just trying to get a print off copy and just start going through it methodically. So I can just kind of pick it apart easier that way.
Yeah, it's the format that it was sent to you it was the easiest way to send it, but not the easiest way to read it. So we've talked about potentially having a reader on the website that would allow you to, see the bookmarks and navigate back and forth a little bit easier.
Wendy,
Yeah,
has anybody?
Most of our computers are horizontal, so that's why you just keep moving.
Right. Yeah.
Kelly and Preston, You may want to talk to Keisha to see how she put our strategic plan on the website. It's very functional, very usable.
She used Issue, which would be a great option. And we have reached out to Keisha just to make sure that it was consistent with the branding guidelines. And
we actually had the vision
from a readability
Right.
standpoint and being
Right.
able to use the document a little bit better.
Yes.
I think it's loaded on a server someplace and you just click on it and it, you know.
Right.
Has anybody called in with public comment, Wendy?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, is there other discussion at this time amongst commissioners or questions regarding this document? Okay, let's go ahead and close the public input session. And if there's no other feedback at this time and everybody's fairly satisfied with what we've seen, knowing that the recommendation is to table this, not to take any action this evening. And it's definitely going to be discussed further at our upcoming retreat and in upcoming meetings. Then if there's no other comment, I guess I'm looking for a motion to table it.
I move this document be tabled until the next meeting, which would be the second Tuesday in February, and I don't know the date, for possible action to adopt at the Regional Planning Commission.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Dagenhart, a second by Commissioner Whitfield to table action on this committee, on this document until our February meeting. Is there any additional discussion? All right, then Nicole, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mays,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Brock,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Chairwoman Wild.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right.
Chairman Wiles, would it be appropriate to ask any of us, any of the commission that have comments to get them to Chris and Kelly by some certain date?
Yes, most definitely. Kelly, is there a particular date that we're looking at? Why don't we, Bob, why don't we hold off on picking a date until after we go into our next topic, which is going to be setting a date for the retreat? Because I would think we would want to get those comments to them before the retreat so that they could be discussed at that time. Okay. So we're going to move into the other section of our agenda, and our discussion topic tonight is a date for the future retreat for the Planning Commission. We held a retreat earlier this summer, and our first retreat was a great opportunity to get to know each other a little better and to do some training that helped us with some of the more transactional business that we do take care of. My intent with this retreat is to make it more of a short-term and long-term planning session, setting some goals. What do we want our Planning Commission to look like as we move forward? Whether or not we have consensus on the idea that we become more strategic in nature, and if so, how do we go about doing that? What are some particular goals that we'd like to see accomplished, and how could we measure those goals? So I'd like to go ahead and try to schedule that as soon as possible. One proposed date was the regular subcommittee meeting time that we hold, which is the first Wednesday of each month. We all hold that on our calendar. So that is one, and I believe that was it February 7th or 8th? I'm not looking at my calendar.
The 3rd.
The 3rd? Okay, thank you. So that is one proposal, and that would be 5 o'clock would be that regularly scheduled meeting time. I'm suggesting we set aside 2.5 hours for a retreat, but I'm open to other suggestions if that one doesn't work for someone, or if anybody wants to throw out something else.
That works for me. I would like to propose that we meet that date, but make it, instead of 2.5 hours, maybe 2 hours.
2 hours? Okay. We could do that. We could do that. One idea was Chris had actually reached out to a retired project manager from Eastman who has offered his potential services to act as a facilitator at that meeting and to kind of guide us through some exercises to help us with some planning and goal setting and things like that. So hopefully we
one of the things that he asked for would be for us to outline specifically what our vision is that we want to accomplish. What would a good endpoint look like? So I would like to suggest that a couple of us work offline and prepare a document that would outline what we're about trying to accomplish and what we're asking him to do for us.
All right, so we have one motion that we go ahead and set our retreat for the first Wednesday of February from 5 to 7 p.m. Are there any other suggestions?
Will this be an in-person meeting or a virtual meeting?
We are going to do it virtually. It's going to make it very challenging for brainstorming sessions, which is why we reached out to somebody to help facilitate, because I think it is going to be a challenge, but I don't think that any of us are comfortable yet, and with the guidelines in place that we would meet in person.
Hey, Chris, can you send out an email outlining those questions that need to be answered? So maybe we could just forward those to you for people who want to participate in that.
Well, I wondered if we wanted to have a little private session, just a couple of us to sort of outline the plan.
Okay.
Instead of trying to do it virtually via email.
Chris, I'd be happy to help out with that.
Jamie, are you volunteering?
Well, just kind of in the back of my head, the way I was looking at it, Chris, is sometimes when you have a smaller group, it's great. You get a lot of things done. But as you're looking at building your vision, you can either choose as a commissioner to participate or not participate, but send it to everybody and then see what responses are like, which ones are different, and then maybe go into a subcommittee. Just a thought. I don't know if it has any, but it was just my thought.
So if I could, a couple of things. Any work that we do as a group, even if it's in a small committee, is a public meeting. Unfortunately, there isn't anything we'll be able to do in a private setting. We can do committees, we can do subgroups. I do think the idea of the entire commission responding in writing with some ideas to answer the question that your consultant asked, Chris, I think is a good start, like what Jamie said. And then maybe is there a subgroup that could meet on Zoom through Wendy to discuss those items in a lead up to the actual event. One of the things to keep in mind is that even with a facilitator, we do have the ability through our Zoom account to do breakout sessions. I've done several over the last year during the pandemic. I've done several Zoom meetings and Zoom seminars that are national, where the host will create breakout rooms, and they work really well. And then the host sets up a time that you're allowed to use the breakout room. So let's say that, you split the commission into 3 different groups, and then everybody goes into a breakout room, and it's set for 15 15 minutes, something like that, and then you come back. All of that looks and behaves just like you would be in a large room setting with traditional breakouts. It's really pretty neat how you can do that all on Zoom. So yeah, I think that this is very doable, something that we want to help facilitate, and we just need to make sure that everything we're doing is out in public.
Preston, is it required to be a open meeting if less than a quorum meets to answer questions? Yes.
Because it's still a committee, it's still a subgroup.
Okay.
As long as it's any kind of deliberation, or what could be considered deliberation, it's considered a public meeting.
Okay.
And just so you know, if anybody emails back and forth about anything, that's all public records, just so everybody knows.
Just not publicly visible until it's asked for, right? Or do we submit it to the record, for the record to Nicole?
The attorney's a Debbie Downer again.
Well, I was going to ask, should Chris send those questions to all of us? And then as we attempt to, each create a response, should that be sent to Nicole to compile for us, or how do we do this? Maintaining.
I think that's how we should do it, because keep in mind that we're here to serve you. We're here to help you all be successful. You all don't need to worry about the administrative functions of the board. And so, yes, if Chris could send that information to Nicole, we will distribute it. We will receive that information, compile it, and then get it back to you in whatever form that you like. And then if there wants to be a subcommittee, a retreat committee, let's call it, that wanted to get together in advance of the meeting, then that could easily happen.
Hey, Chris or Preston, Stacy.
Yeah.
Is there anything, like Chris, what you're talking about, is there anything out there that's been created already that it's kind of like a bubble format where, you have the question, then is it less likely, more likely, more important, less important? Some sort of bubble response that we could all just kind of fill out and then compile it that way?
I'm not aware of any kind of template like that, but I can imagine some different ways to structure some questions that I think will help us make some choices about what we want to do specifically or what we choose not to do.
I think if Chris, you're really good at compiling stuff like that. So if you would kind of put in the top of mind on what questions need to be answered, and maybe figure out some way that we can just, as a group, individually, just say more important, less important, more likely, less likely, something like that.
Okay, I'll take a shot at it, and then I might pass it over to Stacy to get her, make sure that it makes sense to Stacy before I send it to Nicole to be distributed to everybody.
Well, I was going to suggest perhaps you and Dr. Whitfield should work together, because he offered, I hope I'm not speaking for you, but he offered to work on this too. So maybe you two could be the retreat committee and work on getting those questions out to us. And then perhaps we could set a deadline of maybe getting them back 2 weeks before the retreat, so that you can get that information to the facilitator and be able to provide him with what he needs and have us prepared.
Chris, done anything like that in your other tenures?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question, Jamie.
Kelly, Preston, have either one of y'all had any experience with that in your other tenures of trying to help facilitate that type of information?
So we traditionally used a professional facilitator in Salisbury for all board and commission goal setting retreats, and typically it will initiate the same way that Chris just mentioned. Before the day of the event, the facilitator will ask, what are your expected outcomes? What are your what are your expected takeaways? And that's, and then from there, try to determine how does the visioning process look? And then once you identify the visioning process, then what are the strategic goals? But you can't really lay out the visioning process, and certainly not any of the strategic goals, until you have an idea from the group what the anticipated outcome is. And it doesn't need to be complicated. That's just it. Part of what I've experienced in the past is an anticipated outcome could be something as simple as we want to identify what are our 12-month goals, what are our 12-month short-term strategic goals, and then what are our 3 and 5 year goals that will be monitored and updated each year. Because your 12-month goals, you're expected to meet those in a 12-month period. And then every year you will review what are your 3 and 5 and identify those and prioritize.
Gotcha. All right. Thanks, sir.
So Chris, do you think you could format this questionnaire that it would fit on something like SurveyMonkey? And then you're going to get immediate ability to, to download it in a way that will sort the data and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And that, I find that really easy to be able to go in and do.
Yes, I would do that way.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, we never took a formal vote, but are we all in agreement on the first Wednesday of February from 5 to 7 p.m. for a retreat date? Yes. Okay. Yep. And what I'm hearing is that Chris and Ben are going to work together to create a type of questionnaire, maybe on SurveyMonkey, that can be distributed to everyone, that will help provide the answers that the facilitator has asked for ahead of our retreat, and that'll help guide what we want to accomplish during that retreat. And so everybody should look for those in the next week, and then please reply to those ASAP so that they can get that data back to the facilitator and help prepare for the retreat. Okay, and Wendy, you can help us work out how to set up the retreat as a Zoom meeting, and maybe we're going to have some questions about how to do breakout sessions during that too.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, Wendy, if we can also update the chat function so that while we're having a retreat, I think it's also be a helpful way during the retreat is to have the chat function on the side.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We'll talk to our security people here at IT and we'll work that out.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other discussion for tonight's agenda?
Could I we mentioned a timeline to have comments back to me.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh, no. Just
about that.
If possible, so you will get your packet on the 2nd. So I would love to have a week, depending on, how many comments there are. If there are a ton, I would need a week. So if you could get comments to me by the 26th of January, that would be really appreciated.
Okay.
And I can send Stacy and Chris will be very familiar with this format, a web-based document where you can add comments right there live, and you can see other people's comments. I don't know if we kind of talked about that and thought that might be a little bit overwhelming for you all, your first look at it, but maybe after this discussion today, that might be the appropriate thing to send, and with no obligation to send comments, but if you want to, that might be the most efficient way to do it.
It's a very good engine for collecting your comments.
Yeah.
And you don't have to register. You just sign in as a guest, put your name in there. It's really nice.
Right. Okay, great. I'll send that to everybody after.
Good.
Okay. Thank you.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everybody.
Everybody.